Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast with your host, Douglas Wood, author of From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. In each episode, Doug speaks with distinguished legal professionals who have mastered the intricacies of building a successful law practice and then transitioning to retirement or other fulfilling pursuits when the right time comes. Now, let's join Doug for today's insightful discussion.
Welcome. I'm Doug Wood and the host of the Dawn to Dusk podcast. Welcome. Today's guest is Carla Michelotti, a legal and advertising industry trailblazer whose distinguished career spans many decades of impact, innovation, and advocacy. She earned both her BA and her JD from DePaul University, which later honored her with an honorary Doctor of Laws degree. Carla served as Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Counsel, Government and Corporate Affairs Officer at Leo Burnett Worldwide, one of the world's largest and most iconic advertising agencies. In that role, she guided the company through high-stakes litigation, complex mergers and acquisitions, corporate restructuring, global contract negotiations, and the ever-evolving landscapes of employee and regulatory issues. Internationally respected, Carla has been a leading voice in the development of global self-regulation policies in the advertising and marketing industry. Her work has shaped standards and advocacy efforts on issues ranging from free speech to digital privacy, to food marketing, to intellectual property, consumer protection, you name it, the list goes on and on. Her groundbreaking contributions have earned her many, many accolades, too many really to list, but there's one that I would like to mention. She is one of the few people, one of the few lawyers ever in the Advertising Hall of Fame, one of the most iconic luminary, I'll get this out right here, one of the most iconic rewards anybody in the advertising industry can ever achieve. And that's a huge honor. But beyond her professional achievements, Carla remains deeply committed to service. She serves on the boards of DePaul University Board of Trustees, the American Advertising Federation, the Girl Scouts of Greater Chicago and Northwest Indiana, and the House of the Good Shepherd. Carla is not just a leader. She is a pioneer, a mentor, and a model for what it means to combine professional excellence and commitment to the greater good. I've known Carla for most of my career. We've had a lot of fun together all over the world. And she's a person who really epitomizes the idea from dawn to dusk, what this podcast is all about, how you build your business and then how you eventually decide to transition. So welcome, Carla. It's great to have you on.
Doug, I am so happy to be here. I don't know if we can do this in a podcast. I think we need a Netflix series is what I think you and I need.
We won't bring up camels or the Great Wall of China or any of those things during this podcast.
We have had some good adventures. We have done good on many continents, but we've had some good adventures. And like I say, it could be a series on Netflix, so we'd have a lot of fun with it. But thanks for asking me to be here.
No, it's great. You're a perfect guest. So let's just start at the beginning. What motivated you to become a lawyer? Where'd you grow up? Why did you decide to be a lawyer, and how did that all come about?
Okay. In the beginning, in a galaxy far, far away, I grew up on a farm. And the farm is actually about 35 miles northwest of where we sit right now. It is and was a farm. I went to a one-room school, one of the last one-room schools in all of Cook County. It was 16 kids in one school, and there were about 5 families. 4 of the 16 kids were Michelottis. That school closed, went to Barrington schools. After that, about at the age of 12, I decided that I had to think about what I was going to be, because I needed to decide what I was going to be to earn an income. For some reason, on Sunday afternoon, I thought, okay, I have to figure out what my job is going to be. And I liked the Defenders on television. And I said to my mom, I said, can I be a lawyer? And she says, yeah, you can be whatever you want to be. And that was it. And so from 12 years old forward, I told everybody I was going to be an attorney. Before that, I thought I was going to be a teacher. And then I said, nah, teacher is only because that's the only job I've ever seen. Told everybody I was going to be a lawyer, go to law school, hate law school, absolutely hated law school, hated the people, hated the law, hated studying, and was going to drop out of law school and open, as I called it, a wedding factory. Doing weddings and events and hosting things. And my then boyfriend said, you can't quit law school after the first 3 months because you've told everybody in your life for 10 years you're going to be a lawyer. So I didn't quit law law school. I was going to give it a year. Got a job that summer at a company that I had worked at since I was 16. I had worked at Jewel Companies, which is a diversified retailer. It was a grocery store. So I worked at Jewel in Chicago as a checker and a bagger, and Jewel gave me a scholarship to go to college. And then in law school, I actually got myself a job in the legal department at Jewel. And that changed everything. I loved it. I loved working in the legal department. I loved working as a lawyer in the company. I loved seeing how law and business intermixed. They let me do everything. I was cheap labor. They had me doing real estate closings. They had me do presentations. They had me write mini contracts and letters and responding to consumers. So I went back to law school energized, knowing that I wanted to be an in-house attorney, and nobody was even thinking about being an in-house attorney back in those days. I applied to lots of places. I got myself 8 different job offers at corporations around Chicago, a range of corporations from Commonwealth Edison to McDonald's. I applied to law firms too, but I really wasn't interested in that. My sister was a lawyer at a law firm, a big law firm, and I was not interested in doing what I saw her doing. So I applied to lots of different companies with very much direction and focus, got myself 8 job offers, and then Jewel called me and said, "Aren't you going to come talk to us?" And they had told me, Doug, that they weren't going to hire me. So I had not gone to Jewel and asked for a full-time job after graduation because they said they weren't going to hire me. But what in fact they did do is they said, "Okay, what's your highest job offer right now?" And I told them my highest job offer was $16,000 a year, which was the same number that Kirkland was paying back in the day. And so Jewel offered me $17,000 a year, and that was an incredible amount of money back in 1975. And I took the offer, and it's a whole story of why I became a lawyer and why I went to Jewel Companies as my first job. So when I started at Jewel in 1975 as an in-house lawyer, it was the only company I had worked for, in fact, but I felt comfortable that I could have worked other places. So I didn't feel captive by them, which was great. I had great experience with them because I knew the company from the ground up. And if you want me to continue about why it happened to be good that I went there, is as it turned out, the person who gave me my job offer left Jewel in March before I started in June, and he went off to become the general counsel of A&P, or the president, rather, of A&P. And that was I learned a lot about corporate politics because I had accepted my job offer in December. In March, this guy in my class, kind of like one of the law school hot dogs who reads the Wall Street Journal every day, said, "Oh, Carla, you think you're going to Jewel, but the general counsel just quit." And I panicked, and I called the company, and I said, the guy who gave me my job offer, the general counsel, is gone. And they said, "Yeah, you better come back and talk to us." So I had a big dose of corporate politics and how things can shift early on before I even started. So I went back, and of course the job offer was still there. What changed was the guy who went to A&P and became the president of A&P took with him the key people out of the legal department. So when I did start in June, the people that I thought I was going to work with were not there. And the people that were there were the real estate people, but the guy who did the people that did the transactional work for the company were not there. So one of the things that happened, which was very eventful, was they had received a letter within the first 3 months of my employment. Jewel received a letter that said their corporate trademark was canceled. And the interim guy who was running the legal department, who was a mogul in the real estate industry, I mean, he managed billions of dollars of real estate transactions and shopping center leases and whatnot, but he didn't know anything about trademarks. And so he got this letter saying that the corporate trademark was canceled. we had a legal department meeting of the skeleton crew that was left there at the legal department. And he says, does anybody know anything about trademarks? And literally, little Carla Michelotti raises her hand and says, hey, I just had a course in trademarks. Let me look at it. I literally had just had a course in trademarks. And there was, that all the trademark people have gone, all the transactional people, everyone else is doing real estate. He gave me the letter. And that was not only why I went to Jewel, why I became a lawyer, why I went to Jewel, why I went into corporate legal practice. And literally, I went into advertising law. People say, how'd you get into advertising law? I raised my hand at that meeting, and the trademark cancellation letter came in. And the rest is history. I mean, that started a whole adventure right there. I learned so much through the corporate politics that things shift so quickly in corporations, and it turns on the people within the company and management within the company. And then the experience I had with that corporate cancellation, I learned how to lobby early on, Doug. So
Yeah, you did a lot of that. One of the things that's a common theme with many of the people I've been talking to is that their success in their practice, whether it was in-house or outside or whatever, often sprang from crisis. That they volunteered, they were in the right place at the right time where a crisis occurred, and they stepped in and they shined in what they did, and that was sort of the catalyst that really launched their careers, as opposed to sitting back and not taking some risk and stepping forward, which is a true trait of lawyers who have been very successful that I've known in my career and also interviewed in the podcasts. But one of the things you eventually go, how many lawyers were there at Jewel when you were there?
Oh, at Jewel, when I would have gone there, I think there were about 12 attorneys. When I actually went in-house there, I think there were 8 left or something. There weren't that many. And they called me Fred, actually, because there wasn't another woman attorney at the time. And so when these guys were going to lunch with me, they were like, oh, we're going to call you Fred. Because if we go to lunch with Carla, our wives are going to be concerned, but going to lunch with Fred, no one's going to care. So, I mean, it was a different time, and I didn't care. I was happy.
I know that well. So you went from Jewel, you went to Burnett from Jewel, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you started out at a staff attorney level at Burnett.
Yes and no. I was recruited by Mike Breslin, who was the then general counsel, and he talked to me for a year before I came, because I had a broad breadth of experience from Jewel. They let me do SEC. I did a couple 10Ks for Jewel. I did real estate leases. I did contracts. Jewel was grooming me for a big position, and it was a great experience. I never had one bad day at Jewel. I never was the bad guy. I was on the good side of politics. It was amazing. It was like a Horatio Alger story, and I didn't understand that at the time, but they really gave me every opportunity. And so when I met Mike Breslin, he started talking to me about my experience, and he wanted to bring somebody onto the legal department at Burnett, which was very small at the time. I think there were 5 attorneys. He wanted to bring somebody on that had the corporate experience because he wanted to expand his scope. They had kind of pigeonholed him into just this advertising arena. And he was trying to tell the corporation, he should be corporate secretary. He should be on the board. He should, the legal department needed to have a role within the corporate arena, the corporate law. And to make that argument, he needed to have attorneys that were more than the intellectual advertising attorneys. You know what I mean by that? The people that understood the SEC potential, and even in a privately held company, they understood contracts and international law. So he was grooming me to be his number 2 from the very beginning.
Okay, so you joined Leo Burnett in what year did you join them?
79. I came in. I met him in 78. I joined in 79.
And when did you become chief counsel?
Pardon me?
In what
year?
My
God! Okay. I became associate general counsel and ran the legal department from the mid 80s. I should have gone through these dates if you were asking me for all the dates, but probably I was running the legal department, but with the title of associate general counsel, assistant general counsel, associate general counsel, whatever it was called, from like the 84 forward, and then became general counsel It wasn't until the late 90s. And that's a whole stutter step. I mean, it was a long road. They
So
were
in
taking care of me, but I was running things.
so in that sort of 20-year period of time, and rougher, a little bit off on either end, um, we got to know each other, and we worked a lot together. And at the time, you were one of the only women who had arisen to that level within the legal community, corporate community in particular. There were not, everybody I dealt with for the most part were men who were in that kind of a GC, chief counsel level. So tell us a little bit about your challenges as a woman, or as Fred. You already mentioned how it started out with
That was
Fred.
a jewel, yeah.
Great story. But what did you experience it? How did you overcome, which were clearly challenges that male counterparts did not have?
Yeah, there were a lot of stories, and you're going into the advertising community, and I tell people, there's not a woman my age who hasn't experienced every type of sexual harassment, discrimination, issues, confrontation, and you learn very much how to deal with it politely and directly. And back in the day when I used to be a lot cuter, and people would come on to you, and I would just that stops at a certain point in time. But they, you just learn to say, oh, that just makes you healthy, no, thank you very much. And you have to be very careful not to go down that route, because there are women that do go down that route, and you start to mix politics and romance, and that's it, or your corporate life and romance, and that becomes very difficult. There are stories I could tell about, one of the famous stories I do tell is the fact that at Burnett, which is a great corporation, but it was a different time in the 70s. I started in 79, and then my growing years, and I was getting a lot of responsibility and authority from the early 80s forward. I had people reporting to me and lawyers reporting to me from the early 80s forward. So people older than me reporting to me, whatnot. And Burnett had, when I became a vice president, which was maybe 2 years into my stay at Leo Burnett, Burnett had a golf outing. And it was an annual golf outing, a big deal for the vice president and up officers in the administrative end of the company. So not the creatives, not the account people, but the HR people and the finance people, the legal people, anybody that was a vice president and higher. And for the first time, both myself and this other woman who was in HR and I were the two vice presidents who were to be invited to this golf outing. The problem was they hosted it annually at a golf club, which was all men. Absolutely, famously, notoriously all male. And I was like, this is not right. This is illegal. And for 3 years running, I would go into my then boss and say, you hire me to advise you and identify and advise you on risks in the company. I am a risk. I am a known risk. You are having this event. I can't be invited. I can't attend because it caused some scar tissue. I mean, I did things that seems like no big deal, but it was telling all these big boys that what they were doing was illegal, and I didn't I didn't do anything. I didn't take legal action. I didn't file some claim, which maybe people would do today. What happened to the two of us, we did have a separate and equal lunch at the university club the day of the golf outing. So there were goofy things like that. There were lots of trips, Doug, that I would take with people. We had guys traveling to New York all the time. I would travel with them, and we'd be checking into the Plaza Hotel, and they would say, oh, give us one room for me and Carla, and I would just say, no, ha, ha, ha. Thank you very much. You just learn to not go along, get along, but confront and say, no, that's stupid. And let's get going. You have to maintain your own integrity. You have to establish your own boundaries. And at the end of the day, I wanted my reputation to be one of strong and a really smart lawyer that they could lean on and depend on. And I wanted everyone from the CEO down to know that I was the real thing. And that was the reputation that I garnered.
Oh, you definitely did. You were very much the real thing. Crossing you was not a smart move for anybody in the industry. I can attest to it, having
I've
no.
heard that a couple times.
Yeah. So, when you took, how large a group of people in your career did you manage at any given time, at any one time?
I think the largest we ever got was probably 29 people. I think 29 people. And what was interesting is we grew not only as attorneys, but we also had a whole paraprofessional staff. And then in the mid 80s, another time that I raised my hand without even raising my hand, I just jumped into it. In the mid 80s, the whole issue of freedom of speech became very big. And I jumped into that with both feet. I was always a big constitutional law, freedom of speech person. We had clients that were impacted directly by potential regulations that detrimentally affected their ability to advertise, including tobacco clients, advertisers to children, liquor companies. And from 1985 forward, in 1985, I got very directly and personally involved in a debate at the Bar Association on freedom of speech and whether tobacco advertising should be banned or not banned. And I personally jumped into it because I had been active and I had been chairman of the Young Lawyers of the Illinois State Bar Association. So I knew people at the Bar Association. I knew this was going on, and I got myself involved in the debate. And by
That's another example. I mean, that's a great example of one of the common traits of the lawyers I've spoken to as well, where part of their journey to the success that they had has often been where they step into controversial situations that are not easy to be in,
no,
but that nonetheless are important to them or important to beyond them, like First Amendment, whatever. And they dive into it as opposed to back off and try to stick with the status quo. When you jumped into, because I remember it well, when you jumped into the mix of defending, these various companies, they were seen by many people as pariah.
oh yeah.
They were just, you were defending the devil, when in fact anything but that is the case. But a lot of people just didn't, and it was easy to say, I'm not getting in there. But successful lawyers like yourself and others I know, that's when they really shine. They step
Well,
up to the plate and they take on the controversial issues, as you did for many years. And not just First Amendment, you took on privacy, you took on all sorts of things. You were never someone who shied from a controversy.
it
Never.
was fun. It was important. It was not because, as you said, it was not because anyone was telling me to do it. And that's what made it so much fun. It was I went off on this tangent of talking about the government affairs work because you said how many people did you have reporting to you? We had lawyers, we had paralegals, we had secretaries. I had them all reporting to me. Plus, we created a whole government affairs team helping me on this. So I had I created a couple people, training them in the government affairs arena to help write position statements and policy statements. And we took off in that area, as you know, and became quite successful. And it all started from just jumping in when the Bar Association was having this debate. And you're right. If I had thought about it, I would have been scared to do it. And what's interesting is the trade associations, which you know very well, Doug, the ANA and the 4As and the AF were not aware that the Bar Association was about to vote to ban tobacco advertising. And I thought that if the ABA voted to ban tobacco advertising, that was really going to be pretty bad because people think the ABA is pretty smart legally. So if they were going to do something like that, it was going to be bad as a precedent. And I had a lot of fun with it. I certainly won the debate within the state of Illinois. Then Illinois became a big wedge to win the debate within the ABA. And the rest is history. Then I jettisoned into that whole arena, and it was a lot of fun. And you're right, Doug. You have to think about what's beyond your immediate purview without stepping on toes, using teaming. I mean, when you say how many people reported to you, I had people that quote reported to me, but you also in corporate America, you're working with a matrix of people. You're working with other teams, other departments. We operated in 85 countries around the world. So, and the last 15 years of which I was general counsel, more than 15 years, so 16, 17 years that I was general counsel. And before that, I was acting as general counsel. I mean, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. You always had to keep your primary day job of keeping the
Well,
company
yeah,
on the legal.
let's talk a little bit about that primary day job that
Yeah.
you've been a witness to your success and known many of your staff over the years. You were very good at motivate. They were very loyal to you. All of them were very loyal to you because undoubtedly you had ways that you motivated them, rewarded them, whatever. What was your management style that brought on such a loyalty? Because you had an unbelievable loyalty for all of your staff people.
Well, and I like them a lot. I think number one, you have to hire people that there's a lot of smart lawyers. You know that. There's lots and lots of smart lawyers out there. And when we interviewed and hired attorneys, my number one rule was, of course, you're going to be smart, but never hire a jerk. Okay, number one, never hire jerks because there's lots of smart lawyers who are jerks. And hire somebody that you don't mind hanging around from. I get to the office at 7:30 and not leave before 7:30 to 8 o'clock. And so, number one, hire people that you trust, hire people that you're going to be working with closely, hire people that love the law as well as the business with some business acumen. So that's the basic team, the qualities of people that you're going to bring on. But putting together a team of people, I used to say I've used as an analogy, it's like putting together a bouquet of flowers. When you're building a bouquet of flowers, some people are the roses, some are the daisies, some are the filler. You got to keep the thorns out of there. You've got, there's a place for even fillers. So some of the people weren't the smartest attorneys. Some of them were other staff people, but you respect the staff people. You respect the secretaries as much as you're respecting the lawyers. You treat everyone, the CEO on down, equally. You have to do that. You have to treat people equally. And that was
Along the lines of your analogy to flowers, making a bouquet. I had a client who once said that every card makes a difference in a deck of cards, the ace down to the two, and you can't play without a full deck. And he was that was the kind of diversity and the kind of broad stroke, analogy he would use to describe how he had to build his team with aces and with deuces, but they were all going to work together in the same game.
Yeah, and you build this bouquet and you appreciate it, and ironically, our little team, our legal department, which was not the biggest department in the agency, but we were influencing things on a global basis. Our clients, as you know, included the biggest multinational companies in the world. I had to develop relationships and maintain those relationships with changing personnel within the legal departments and brand groups at the clients. So you're dealing with the Philip Morrises and the Kellogg's and the McDonald's and the Coca-Colas and the Procter and Gamble's. And these clients, I needed to have my brand credible within the brand group of that client, plus within the legal group within that client. And my philosophy was, and we used to talk about this at staff meetings, so our clients have a lot of other things to worry about. I used to use United Airlines as an example. United Airlines has lots of things to worry about, not the advertising. If we can worry about the advertising and not and encourage them that they can trust us, that we're worrying about the advertising and they don't have to, that's a wonderful thing. And so my approach was, we're going to absolutely go very deep and narrow on the advertising and the branding and the marketing issues that those multinational clients have. Because if we can worry about that, McDonald's has lots of things to worry about. United Airlines has lots of things to worry about. Philip Morris had an incredible amount of things to worry about. But if we can worry about our little piece of the business and they can trust us with that, that's a good thing. And then the brand group can trust us as well as the legal department. And just like I learned early on, before I ever started at Jewel or Leo Burnett, people change. If you just get married to one person at a client, you know that, Doug, if you are just close to one person and you have that one relationship with that one person, that person is going to go someplace else someday. They're going to get a different job. They're going to be fired, hired, transferred, whatever. So you really have to maintain your credibility with the whole client. And I saw that as fun. I really like that. I like people, you know that. I like people and I like good people. And there were very, very few clients that I ever crossed where I said, "Oh my God, this is a real challenge." And so you develop your relationships. You've written about this. You're a master at it. You need to develop your relationship with the clients and develop your relationships internally. And the job of an in-house counsel is to make that is to avoid problems for the corporation, try to avoid litigation, manage the crises that occur most efficiently, and help the company to make money. Help the company make money. And if any lawyer has a problem with capitalism, they don't belong in the legal department of a corporation.
Whether in-house or outside, doesn't matter. But you do make one really interesting point about the differences between in-house and outhouse, as it were, lawyers. And that's the whole viewpoint of litigation. A law firm would tell you that that's the cash cow. Litigation is way, and they don't overtly say always litigate, but they know that the real revenue comes out of litigation if there's any particular area that they can concentrate on. On the other hand, the corporate counsels like yourself knew that litigation was extremely expensive and should be avoided as much as possible. So it was always I always found it interesting talking to you and other in-house counsel over the years of my practice that balancing that sort of keeping your gladiator litigators off to the side and not let them eat somebody else's lunch before the general counsel at the company has their priorities much more organized in terms of what the corporation needs, not necessarily what the litigator needs to satisfy their voracious appetite for finding a way in court. But that's kind of that balance that you as an in-house counsel have to often deal with. But here let me move to a sort of a segue here to another subject. I mean, you obviously had great success. You created a wonderful group of people, and I love your point about how hire people you like. And a lot of your success is what we talked about before: opportunity in crisis, stepping forward, not being afraid to take on the controversial issues, and breaking through those barriers, whether it be as a woman in the business or just as in the advertising industry in general, breaking through barriers that the industry has had to do all this time. So you had great success. You had great honors throughout this whole time. The Advertising Hall of Fame and all the others that I didn't list. I mean, I invite listeners and viewers to go to to go to LinkedIn and see them all. It's like a ridiculously long list, but it's great. And it's all really well deserved. But at some point, you walked into the office one day at Leo Burnett and said, "You know what? It's time to think about moving on." Now, I don't know if Leo Burnett had a succession plan process that many corporations have or not, but tell us a little bit about that evolution to realizing that all that success was something you had to sort of say goodbye to.
There were two evolutions. One is the evolution of Leo Burnett. I mean, if people know the history of the advertising and history of Leo Burnett, and when I joined Leo Burnett, it was a privately held company. Then it became an S corporation. Then we acquired a major other holding company. We thought we were going to go public. Then we sold off a piece of Dentsu. Then instead of going public, we were bought by Publicis. All of this in the lifetime of being there at Leo Burnett. So, when I was at the last many years of my career, we were part of Publicis Group. So that, you have to evolve your career and your expectations also within your corporate environment. So once we were managing all of the corporation, the entire holding group for the global company, now we are managing the group, which was the largest subsidiary within Publicis Group. So a lot of my discussion was going back and forth to Paris, and it changed my life significantly in a good way with new challenges and whatnot. So that was my life. I was still general counsel of Leo Burnett for many years, but also managing up to the French holding company. So in that environment, about a little over 10 years ago, 14 years ago, 15, yeah, I had a health adventure. So I had a health adventure where I needed chemo treatments, and it all worked out well. I'm knocking on wood. but I would go in for these chemo treatments, and the then CEO of Leo Burnett, Tom Bernardin, could not have, who was my boss, could not have been nicer, could not have been better. Take all the time you want. But I'd go in for the chemo treatments, and they would walk in with hazmat outfits and double rubber gloves, and then they'd mainline it into me. And my schedule was, okay, they're going to do that. And then I would say the rosary and then start conference calls. So for the time that I was doing chemo, I did the rosary, and then I would get on my conference calls and do emails. So I'm there with this stuff being mainlined, seriously, and they're coming with hazmat outfits, and I'm talking about whatever crisis du jour, and you know that advertising crises du jour can be incredibly mundane things. And I've been on the carousel a long time. And so I don't care if it was a multi-million-dollar litigation or Happy Meal crisis, whatever it was just another game to me by that time. I was just hitting the ball back over the net. I knew how to do it. I did it well. I enjoyed it, but it was a game. Keep the ball going. And as I'm talking to people about whatever it was, in my head, I said, I got to get off this merry-go-round. This is not a good idea. Something's wrong with this picture, because here's my body and I'm doing this with my mind. I'm being pulled into something else. So I decided then I was going to leave. I didn't tell my husband, Bob, for another 6 months because I wanted to make sure I knew I was going to leave. I didn't tell my CEO for another 3 months after that. So I had to embrace this idea. I really am going to go and feel very comfortable with it for a long time. And as I'm doing that, I was always good at giving away stuff and teaching people. And so my job, I had a lot of responsibilities, but I also knew how it was going off, divvying into different arenas. By the time I left, Publicis had 7 people who took over pieces of my job. And the piece that no one ever took to this day is the government affairs lobbying piece that you're aware of. I mean, they just didn't do that. But all the other functionary day job things, I counted 7 different people that were taking on, this one's going to do that and this one's going to do that, just to keep the wheels moving forward. Because you have to realize everyone is going to be replaced. Everybody is going to be replaced. The work goes on, the job goes on. And early on, I learned that you have to learn how to give away things. A short story, if I can, goes way back to when I was a checker at Jewel. I was 17 years old, and I was a grocery store checker, and I would bring up my drawer at the end of the night, and there was a lady behind the service desk who counted your drawer down, and she would keep records, and she would put the money in the safe, and I would ask her all these questions, and she never wanted to answer my questions. And I went home, and I talked to my mother, who was brilliant, and I said, why doesn't she tell me what she's doing? I want to know how that works. I want to know how my little drawer fits into the whole scheme of the grocery store. And my mom said, if she tells you that, Carla, you're going to take her job. She's afraid. I said, and she said to me at 17, don't ever be afraid to tell people what you're doing. Because if you don't give away and teach people what you're doing, you're always going to be stuck doing the same thing. I said, she's going to be there, Mama said, behind the service desk. And you're going to be going off and doing different things because she didn't teach you what she's doing. So always teach people what you're doing. And I embrace that. I really believe that, Doug, because you have to believe there's always more to do. So I graduate from Leo Burnett. I tell people I'm leaving. I stayed 1 month longer than I told people I was going to stay because it took me forever to get all the stuff packed up in my office, as you can understand. And there's always more to do. I mean, there's tons of stuff to do in the world. I'm still involved in lots of different things within the advertising industry and the privacy issues and AI issues and internet issues. And I'm in awe of your website, Doug. It's like very intimidating what you're doing and very good. You're inspiring me to get more involved in even educating people about what I am doing. But there's always more people out there. There's always more people to mentor. There's a lot of knowledge that people like you and I have that we can just give away to organizations.
One of the observations that I love about what you just said, I'll make an observation that your success in your career was a lot about, again, stepping forward, volunteering, jumping into the fray, taking crisis and being forward moving and that kind of stuff. And then the misconception that so many people have is that when you stop doing that, there's a vacuum. When in fact, in your case, in my case, in other cases, I know that vacuum is actually even more exciting and more free feeling because you're not obligated to anybody, that you can make that transition in an incredibly positive way. You're an example of someone who's done it. I know too many examples of people who did not, because they really, everything they did was that job. And
Such a mistake.
You didn't plan on letting it go. They didn't understand how letting it go. But the expression I use, similar to what you said earlier, is that sooner or later we all reach our use-by date. Whether we like it or not, it's going to come.
Right.
And either we realize it through a crisis like your health challenge you had, you realize it through other events that occur, whether you're automatically let go for some contractual reasons or whatever it is. There's those moments, and if you don't figure out how to plan, like you planned it, you figured it out, you planned it. You make sure you delegate it right. If you wait too long, that's when the disaster happens. And the lessons that I'm trying to have people hear on this podcast from people like yourself is that there is great excitement, great opportunity, and it's a lot of fun. So don't fear it. A lot of that woman behind that counter, she was afraid to tell you anything because she was afraid, as your mom said, that you're going to take her job. Well, I always had the attitude, and I know you did too. Go ahead, take my job. I'll do something else. I'm not so paranoid about myself that I don't, in my own egotistical bullshit, can say I'm going to do that. And that kind of you really do epitomize that kind of drive from the time you were practicing as a general counsel and supervising people, motivating people, dealing with crisis, and being in the middle of hearings in Congress and you name it. I know all the things you did. And now it's not like you're vanished. You're doing all these other things and really enjoying it. And that's the hope. That's the message I want viewers and listeners to get out of this. And you're the example of success from the dawn to the dusk. And it's like, I never say sunset because there never is a sunset. It's always just dusk. So you can keep plugging on. Well, listen, Carla, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. I think that, as I said, you're really, truly, and I mean this sincerely, you're one of the most inspiring people I know in terms of how you battled through all that you had to battle through to become the success you were, and how you continue to be an icon in the industry. So thanks again for being on. And if any viewers or listeners want to learn more about Carla, we have information on her on the website. And you can, of course, check her out on LinkedIn and all the other places that people put their data. So thank you, Carla, and thank you all listeners and viewers for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Doug, for asking me to come on today. I so enjoy talking to you always.
Thank you for joining us on the Dawn to Dusk podcast. You can learn more on building and transitioning a multi-million-dollar law practice in Doug's book, From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. If you're interested in working with Doug, suggesting future guests, or have questions you'd like Doug to ask guests in upcoming episodes, reach out to him at douglas.wood@wood.law or visit his website at dawntodusk.wood.law. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your peers. Until next time, we appreciate your viewership.